In the shattered skies of Aereth, wings are more than bone and sinew. They are oaths. They are curses. This is the tale of Lysara, last heir to a court long burned into ash, and Kael, lord of the Twilight Court, whose fate is bound to hers in a pact older than the stars. Together they will face living walls, rival courts, and a sky splitting open above their heads. But nothing will be as dangerous as the love they cannot afford to feel. If you're ready to feel every heartbeat, every betrayal, every impossible kiss, hit subscribe and let the story begin. The wind cut like 1,000 silver blades as Lysara dove through the low clouds, the warped toll of war bells echoing from the suspended city of Aereth. Its spiral towers rose from the mist like the ribs of some colossal beast, while the living walls below shifted in a slow, almost imperceptible ripple, as if the city itself was breathing. The air smelled of burnt iron and withered petals, a cruel reminder that Aereth had been at war with itself for decades. "Don't look down. Not yet," she whispered under her breath, the weight of the heart of ruin pressing against her hip. Each pulse from the artifact throbbed against her skin like a second heartbeat, one that did not belong to her. She landed with the precision of a hawk upon the obsidian balcony of the Twilight Spire. Kael was waiting for her, every inch of him carved in shadow and moonlight, his violet eyes assessing her as if she were a stranger. The faint rustle of his wings was the only sound between them, until he spoke. "You disappeared for months, Lysara." His voice deep, steady, but carrying the sharp edge of accusation. Her fingers tightened on the strap of the artifact, though she forced her tone to remain calm. "I found something. Something we both need." She didn't mention the whispers. Not yet. Kael's gaze dropped to the heart of ruin, and his jaw clenched. "You stole from the vault of echoes." The words were not a question. Around them, the sky shifted in colors, bruised purples and molten golds, the omen of an approaching storm. Lysara's thoughts splintered between the memory of finding the artifact in the depths of the vault and the voice that had guided her there. If he knew the price I paid, would he still look at me like this? She said nothing, only stepping closer, her own wings rustling like dry leaves. Below, the living walls began to stir more violently, their surface rippling like water under a sudden wind. Kael noticed too, his attention flicking past her shoulder. Something's wrong with the wards. The storm in the sky deepened, and with it came the low, bone-deep hum of old magic. Lysara's pulse matched the artifact's rhythm. The whispers were clearer now, threading into her thoughts. "The gate opens, and you will not stop it." She bit back the urge to react, but Kael's eyes narrowed. He knew she was hiding something. A thunderclap split the air, though no lightning followed. In the center of Aereth's main square, light pooled like molten glass, twisting into a shape that was not entirely solid. A portal, shimmering and ancient, tore itself open with a groan of stone and air. Kael's voice was a low command. "Stay here," but Lysara was already stepping to the balcony's edge. "If you think I came back to stand still, you've forgotten who I am." For a heartbeat their gazes locked, challenge against challenge, before they leapt into the air together. The closer they flew, the stronger the pull of the portal became, as though invisible claws were dragging them in. Lysara could taste the metallic tang of magic on her tongue, and the air around them shimmered with heat. The heart of ruin pulsed faster, almost frantic now, and the whispers were no longer in her mind. They were in the air, in the ground, in the beat of Kael's wings beside hers. It begins. It begins. By the time they landed in the square, the light was blinding, and a single thought crystallized in Lysara's mind. Whatever is coming, it was meant for me. The portal's light faded into a haze, leaving behind a ring of blackened stone that still hummed with power. Lysara crouched low, fingertips brushing the scorched ground. It was warm, too warm for something that had only appeared seconds ago. Kael kept his distance, wings half furled, watching her every move like a predator assessing a rival hunter. "This is old magic," he said, his voice low, "older than the courts themselves." She glanced up at him, her jaw tight. "Older than you know." The heart of ruin pulsed once, hard, and the whisper returned, not in words, but in a memory she had never lived. A flash of dark corridors carved in bone, a figure with eyes like black fire, reaching for her with blood-stained hands. She gasped, stumbling back into Kael's grip. His touch was steady, grounding, but her heart was a storm. "What did you see?" he demanded. Her wings twitched, instinctively folding closer. "Nothing," she lied, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. He didn't press her. Not yet. But the tension between them thickened. A thread stretched to breaking. From the shadowed edge of the square, movement caught her eye. A tall figure in a tattered cloak slipped into the alleyways beyond, glancing back once with eyes she knew far too well. Avaron, her mentor, her betrayer. Lysara's pulse spiked, and Kael saw it. "You know him," he said, not asking. She stepped away from the portal, toward the narrowing streets. "I thought he was dead." Kael's wings spread wide, blocking her path. "Then maybe you should let him stay that way." The living walls groaned, shifting to close off the streets, as though the city itself was protecting the figure. Lysara's feathers bristled. "Aereth doesn't seal paths without reason," she murmured. Kael's jaw set. "Exactly. Which means you're walking into something you don't understand." The heart of ruin burned against her side, a counterpoint to his warning, urging her forward. The magic here was awake, restless, and it knew her name. A gust of wind tore through the square, scattering ash like snow. For a moment, the air smelled of lavender, her mother's scent, and Lysara's chest tightened painfully. The vision of the cloaked figure sharpened in her mind, as if the magic itself was pushing her toward him. Kael's voice cut through the haze, sharp as steel. "Lysara, stay." She met his gaze, saw the storm brewing there, and stepped past him anyway. They moved together toward the narrowing streets, their shadows stretching long and jagged under the portal's fading light. Somewhere ahead, Avaron's footsteps echoed against the stones, deliberate, unhurried, as though he wanted her to follow. Lysara's mind was a snarl of questions, but one rose above the rest. If my mentor walks among enemies, what does that make me? The court of Dawn's grand hall shimmered with veils of golden light, cast through crystal windows that reached higher than the tallest spires of Aereth. Music drifted through the air, soft, languid, a calculated contrast to the tension beneath it. Lysara moved through the crowd of winged courtiers, every glance she drew tinged with suspicion or hunger. At the far end of the hall, Kael stood in formal armor, his wings mantled in quiet authority, watching her with the same intensity as the first day they met. When the music shifted, he crossed the floor, offering his hand without a word. She took it, her palm fitting into his with a familiarity that made her pulse quicken. They began to dance, their movements a careful, predatory circle, a display for the watching crowd, but also a silent duel. "You look like you want to be anywhere but here," Kael murmured. She tilted her head just enough to meet his gaze. "Only because I can't fly inside these walls." His smile was brief, sharp. "We'll see." The steps brought them close enough for her to feel the heat of him, the faint brush of his feathers against hers. Every turn was calculated, every pause heavy with words unsaid. "Don't let him see too much," she warned herself. But Kael was reading her, and she could feel it, the slow peeling back of layers she had spent years building. He leaned in, voice barely above the music. Avaron was here, tonight. Her foot faltered, just once, but it was enough. Before she could reply, the music cracked, not stopped, but fractured, as a body dropped from the vaulted ceiling, striking the marble with a sickening finality. Gasps erupted, wings flaring all around them. Lysara froze, eyes locking on the messenger's limp form. A dagger protruded from his chest, its hilt carved with the mark of the ruins court, a court that should not exist anymore. Kael's hand tightened on hers, pulling her back from the spreading pool of blood. Guards swept in, the music gone, the hall buzzing with panic and speculation. Kael leaned close enough that only she could hear. "Who still uses that mark?" She shook her head slowly, though her mind whispered an answer she would not give him. "Me." The heart of ruin pulsed once, and she felt the gaze of unseen eyes from the shadows above. Something was watching, waiting. As the body was carried away, a folded piece of parchment slid across the floor, stopping at her feet. No one else seemed to see it. She bent to pick it up, feeling the weight of the room's stairs. When she unfolded it, the words were few but sharp as any blade. "We need to talk, before the sky breaks again." And beneath it, in ink, the color of old blood, her true name. The sanctuary of the shattered light stood at the edge of Aereth's highest cliff, its walls carved from pale stone that shimmered faintly even in shadow. Lysara entered alone, her footsteps echoing on the cold marble floor as shafts of fractured sunlight fell through the broken dome above. The air was thick with the scent of burned sage and rain-soaked feathers, a mixture that made her chest ache with memories she didn't own. Along the walls, inscriptions spiraled upward in an ancient tongue, each line a fragment of prophecy. She traced her fingers over one wing for the seal, one heart for the sky. The whisper returned, stronger here, curling around her thoughts. You were never meant to survive this place. She closed her eyes, letting the chill of the stone seep into her palms. The heart of ruin throbbed in rhythm with the words, its warmth crawling up her arm. Somewhere above, a fragment of glass fell from the dome, shattering against the floor, and she knew she was no longer alone. Kael's presence filled the space, his shadow stretching long across the fractured light. I told you this place was dangerous, he said, his voice reverent but edged. She didn't turn. Dangerous places tend to hold the truths no one else wants to find. He stepped closer, his boots silent against the stone, until the heat of him touched her back. Truths can kill just as easily as lies, he murmured. She finally faced him, wings folding tight. And lies can kill without you even knowing it happened. His eyes flicked to the artifact at her hip. What is it telling you, Lysara? The question landed like a blade between them. She could have lied, but instead she stayed silent. He moved past her toward the altar, running his hand over the cracked surface where light pooled in thin streams. The glow dimmed briefly at his touch, and for a moment, he seemed older, as though the light itself was showing her another version of him. There's something else here, he said. The words were barely out before the altar flared, casting both of their shadows against the wall in shapes that were not their own. Wings longer, darker, sharper. Lysara's breath caught. They were looking at the shapes of their deaths. The vision lasted only seconds, but its weight pressed hard on her chest. Kael's eyes met hers, and for once, there was no accusation in them, only recognition. The sacrificed wing, he said quietly. It's real. Her throat was dry, and it's coming for us. She stepped away from the altar, the heart of ruin almost burning through the fabric between them. She wanted to tell him about the whispers, about the scent of lavender that followed her here, but fear locked the words in her mouth. When they stepped back into the daylight, the air had shifted. The sky was darker now, the bruised purple deepening into black. Far below, the living walls writhed as though in pain. Lysara's gaze lingered on the horizon, and there, barely visible, a figure with tattered wings stood watching them. Avaron. And in that instant she knew. The sanctuary had given her no answers, only more questions. How do you fight a prophecy that already knows the shape of your death? The flight back to the Twilight Spire was silent, but tense, the wind carrying only the rush of their wings. Kael kept just ahead of her, as though guiding her path without allowing her to fly beside him. The city below was restless. She could feel it in the shifting of the living walls, the quickened steps of people in the streets. When they landed on the obsidian balcony, he turned to her with a controlled calm that was worse than anger. You've been keeping things from me, he said, voice low but sharp. She opened her mouth, but he cut her off. And now people are dying for it. Her feathers bristled, but she forced her voice steady. Do you think I wanted this? That I asked for the heart of ruin to find me? His expression didn't change. You didn't find it. It found you. And that's the problem. The words struck harder than she expected. She looked away, focusing on the storm clouds gathering beyond the spires. The smell of ozone prickled in the air, a scent that promised violence. Somewhere in the distance, a low roar rumbled, and she knew it wasn't thunder. The attack came swift as a knife. From the northern sky, creatures of twisting mist and bone, serpents of the veil, dove toward the city, their screeches shattering windows. Kael's wings flared wide, and in an instant he was airborne. Stay here, he shouted, but she was already following, the cold air searing her lungs. The serpents struck at the living walls, tearing through them with impossible speed, and each breach bled a light that hurt to look at. The city's own defenses were breaking from within. In the chaos, she spotted Avaron fighting among the creatures, his blade a streak of silver in the dark. For a heartbeat, hope bloomed, but it shattered when she saw him driving the serpents deeper into the heart of Aereth. Her breath caught, rage and confusion tangling inside her. Why? She dove toward him, wings straining against the downdraft of magic pouring from the breaches. "Avaron!" she shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Kael intercepted her mid-flight, forcing her back toward the safer air above the square. "Do you see it now?" he demanded. "He's not the man you think he is." She struggled against his grip, fury sparking in her chest. "And you're not the judge I need right now." The heart of ruin blazed hot against her, its voice finally clear. Choose who to save. The words chilled her to the bone. She looked between Kael and Avaron, both battling, both vital, and felt the weight of a decision she wasn't ready to make. By the time the last serpent fell, the city was bleeding light from a dozen wounds. The air reeked of burnt magic and fear. Avaron was gone. Kael landed beside her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were locked on the heart of ruin. "It's waking up," he said, almost to himself. Lysara touched the artifact and felt its pulse answer. For the first time, she wondered if the heart wasn't just an artifact at all, but something alive. And if it was alive, what did it want from her? The council chamber of Aereth was carved from a single monolith of black stone. Its ceiling opened to the restless sky above. Leaders from the winged courts gathered around a table shaped like a compass rose, each point representing their domains. The air smelled faintly of lightning and crushed herbs, a subtle ward against deceit. Lysara sat beside Kael, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some hostile. At the far end, Queen Avaron of the Dawn Court lounged in her throne-like chair, her golden wings draped like a cloak of fire. Her smile was almost warm, but her gaze was a blade. When she spoke, it was silk wrapped in steel. And here is the ghost returned, bearing the most dangerous relic of our time. Lysara's feathers twitched, but she held her chin high. "You speak as though the heart chose me." "It didn't." Varen's eyes gleamed. "Didn't it?" The subtle laughter in her tone drew murmurs from the other leaders. Kael shifted beside her, his hand tightening on the armrest. Not to restrain her, but himself. Lysara could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. Avaron's name surfaced during the debate, and Lysara's focus sharpened. Varen spoke of him with a familiarity that twisted Lysara's stomach. "He serves a higher cause now," the queen said, as though discussing the weather. "One beyond the petty borders of our courts." The words were deliberate, baiting Lysara to respond. She bit back her retort, knowing every syllable would be used against her. Still, the question burned. What cause? And why does she speak of him as an ally? Kael finally broke the stalemate. "If the heart of ruin is waking, it changes everything." His voice carried enough authority to still the murmurs, but Varen only tilted her head, studying him as though weighing an unseen measure. "Changes everything," she repeated, "or ends everything." The wind above the open ceiling shifted, sending a scatter of petals and ash drifting down onto the table, a subtle omen no one acknowledged out loud. The debate spiraled into politics. Which court would hold the heart? Who would guard the portals? What sacrifices might be necessary? Lysara listened, but her mind drifted to the queen's earlier words. Avaron's higher cause sounded less like treachery and more like a plan. But whose plan? Her feathers itched with the need to move, to find him, but the council was a gilded cage. Varen's eyes never left her, and Lysara realized that here, in this room, every glance was a move in a dangerous game. When the meeting finally adjourned, Kael led her toward the balcony without a word. Only when they were out of sight did he speak. "She knows more than she's saying." Lysara exhaled, her wings shifting restlessly. "Then we make her tell us." His expression hardened. "That's not how she plays." The heart of ruin pulsed once against her side, and for a fleeting moment, she imagined it laughing. They moved through the city under the cover of moonlight, the streets quiet save for the whisper of wings overhead. Kael led the way, his steps purposeful but silent, until they reached the base of the old cartographer's tower. The door was sealed with runes that shimmered faintly at their approach. Lysara reached for them, her fingers tracing the lines, feeling the magic hum in response to her touch. "You've been here before," Kael observed. She didn't answer. The truth would raise more questions than she was ready to face. Inside, the air was cool and dry, carrying the scent of old parchment and stone dust. Maps covered every wall, some drawn on stretched leather, others etched into thin sheets of metal. The glow of the runes cast their shadows long and strange across the floor. Lysara's eyes caught on a single map pinned apart from the rest, a depiction of the ruins, but with landmarks she'd never seen before. "These are older than the city itself," she murmured. Kael came to stand beside her, his presence steady, unyielding. A creak from above made them both look up. In the rafters, a small mechanical bird sat watching them, its eyes glinting like tiny lanterns. Kael's hand went to his blade, but Lysara stopped him. "It's a messenger," she said. The bird tilted its head, then dropped a scroll into her hands before vanishing into the shadows. She unrolled it to find a series of coordinates, and beneath them, a mark she recognized instantly: Avaron's. Kael's feathers shifted in agitation. It could be a trap. Lysara met his gaze. "It's definitely a trap." She rolled the map again, tucking it into her belt. "That's why we have to go." His eyes darkened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he moved toward a set of narrow stairs winding upward, toward the tower's highest level. "If we're going, we go prepared." She followed, her pulse quickening, not entirely from fear. At the top, the city stretched out beneath them like a tapestry of shadow and starlight. The coordinates pointed to the Dead Hollow, a place the living walls had closed off decades ago. Kael studied the map in her hand, his jaw set. "We go tomorrow, before the other courts know we're gone." The heart of ruin throbbed in agreement, but Lysara couldn't tell if it was guiding her or itself. As they left the tower, the air felt heavier, the shadows deeper. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of wings followed them. Too slow to be a bird, too light to be a warrior. Lysara didn't mention it, but her feathers prickled. Whatever watched them now, it was patient. The Dead Hollow was exactly as its name promised: silent, suffocating, and stripped of life. Even the air here felt wrong, carrying no scent, no sound beyond the faint rustle of their wings. The living walls formed jagged spirals around the hollow, as if the city had tried to seal this place away from itself. Kael landed first, scanning the terrain with the caution of someone who knew the ground might rise up against him. Lysara followed, her boots sinking slightly into soil the color of dried blood. They didn't have to search long. In the center of the hollow, Avaron stood waiting, his cloak stirring in a wind that didn't exist. His eyes, once a stormy silver, now burned with an inner light that made her chest tighten. "You came," he said, as though it were inevitable. "And you brought him." Kael's hand went to his blade. "You've been leading her into danger since the day she was born." Avaron smiled faintly. "Danger is the only place she'll find the truth." The exchange was cut short by the shriek of something massive overhead. Shadows passed across the ground, and Lysara's wings flared instinctively. From the sky descended a harrowed beast, a chimera of bone and shadow, its talons striking the ground with enough force to crack the earth. The impact threw her off her feet, the world spinning until the taste of blood filled her mouth. Kael's voice was a distant roar. "Lysara!" She forced herself upright, but one wing hung useless at her side, the joint screaming with pain. The beast turned its empty gaze on her, and the heart of ruin blazed hot enough to sear through her clothing. She felt its voice press against her mind, not whispering now, but demanding. "Give me your strength." Her breath came ragged, torn between fear and fury. "Take it, then," she spat, and the artifact answered. Power surged through her, sharp and wild, flooding into her injured wing until she could move it again. The air around her crackled, her feathers shimmering as though dipped in molten silver. She launched herself at the beast, driving her blade into its side. The scream that followed was not of pain, but recognition, as if it knew her, and that terrified her more than the fight itself. When it fell, the ground split open, revealing a glimpse of something beneath the hollow, an endless void laced with light like veins of molten gold. Avaron's gaze locked on hers. "You've only seen the edge." And before she could demand answers, he stepped backward and vanished into the rift. They flew back to Aereth in silence, the weight of unanswered questions pressing between them. Kael landed hard on the balcony, his expression set in grim lines. "He's playing with you," he said, turning to face her. "You know that." Lysara's wings ached. the wound from the hollow throbbing despite the artifact's strange healing. "Maybe," she admitted, "but he's still the only one telling me anything." Kael's jaw tightened. "He's telling you just enough to ruin you." In her chambers, Lysara unrolled the map Avaron had left in the tower. The lines and symbols made more sense now, forming the outline of a court that didn't exist in the histories, the Court of Ashes. As she traced its boundaries, a memory surfaced that wasn't hers. A woman with wings like hers, eyes bright with defiance, standing before a burning city. Her voice echoed in Lysara's mind. "Run, and don't look back." She stumbled away from the table, her breath unsteady. Kael entered without knocking, his gaze drawn immediately to the map. "Where did you get that?" She considered lying, but the exhaustion in her bones left no room for games. Avaron. His silence was heavier than any accusation. Finally, he stepped closer, eyes on hers. "Your mother served that court. Died for it." The words were a blow she hadn't braced for. "How do you know that?" His wings shifted. "Because I was there." The revelation hit like cold water. She wanted to demand more, to tear the whole truth from him, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't fear, it was regret. And in that regret, she saw something deeper, something that had been buried for years. "You're not telling me everything," she said. His answer was quiet. "I can't, not yet." The heart of ruin pulsed once, as if mocking the silence between them. She turned away, staring out the window at the restless sky. "Then you'd better decide when yet ends," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut. Behind her, Kael's wings shifted, but he didn't move closer. Whatever bound them together was tightening, and she couldn't tell if it was love, fate, or something far darker. The first crack appeared at dawn, a thin line of light splitting the horizon. Lysara stood on the highest balcony, watching it grow, the air trembling around it like the surface of disturbed water. Kael joined her, silent for a long moment before speaking. "The rift is waking faster than we thought." She nodded, unable to look away. "It's not just the rift. It's the heart. It's pulling toward it." Her hand went to the artifact, feeling its heat spread through her ribs. Far below, the living walls shifted violently, parts of them collapsing into the streets. The city's alarm bells began to toll, their sound distorted, like voices shouting through water. Kael's wings flared. "We have to seal the breaches before the other courts see weakness." She looked at him sharply. "Weakness or opportunity?" His eyes narrowed. "Both, and neither is in our favor." They took to the air together, the wind full of grit and the scent of stone breaking. Over the northern quarter, a new breach yawned open, and from it poured creatures made of light and shadow twisted together. They moved too fast, too fluid to be entirely real, their forms shifting with every glance. Lysara dove into them, her blade passing through one without resistance. Yet the pain in her arm was real, as though she had struck steel. Kael's voice cut through the chaos. "They're echoes. You can't kill them." She gritted her teeth. "Then tell me how to stop them." He didn't answer immediately, instead driving them back with controlled bursts of magic from his wings. The echoes dissolved into sparks, but more emerged from the crack in the sky. Relentless, the heart of ruin burned hot, and she felt it urging her toward the breach itself. She obeyed the pull, ignoring Kael's shout behind her. The closer she came, the more the light from the crack seemed to twist, reaching for her like hands made of fire. Her vision blurred, and in it, she saw herself standing on the other side. Wings gone, but still flying somehow. It was impossible, and yet, she believed it. The echo of her own voice whispered from the rift. One must fall for the other to rise. Kael reached her just as the vision shattered, grabbing her arm and pulling her back from the light. "Whatever it's showing you, it's lying." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to. But as the breach began to seal on its own, the last whisper lingered in her mind, and it sounded like the truth. The council reconvened in chaos, the leaders of the winged courts shouting over one another as reports of the breaches multiplied. Lysara sat apart from them, her mind still caught in the whisper from the rift. Kael stood near the entrance, silent, his gaze never leaving her. When Queen Varen entered, the room quieted instantly. She strode to the table, her golden wings catching the light like a flare. "The Court of Ashes stirs," she declared, "and the heart of ruin has chosen its bearer." Her gaze found Lysara, And in that moment, the air seemed to thin. "We will convene a trial," Varen continued. "One that will prove whether you are a weapon or a mistake." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Kael stepped forward. "She has nothing to prove." Varen's smile was slow, calculated. "Then she will pass without effort." The council approved the trial unanimously, though the unease in the room was palpable. Lysara's fingers itched toward her blade. After the meeting, Kael caught her by the arm. "You can't trust them to play fair." She gave a humorless laugh. "Since when has anything in my life been fair?" His grip tightened. "I mean it. Trials in Varen's court don't end in honor. They end in blood." Lysara met his gaze, her feathers brushing against his. "Then I'll bleed." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meanings neither dared to untangle. That night, she sharpened her blade under the cold light of the moons. The sound of steel on whetstone was steady, almost soothing. Memories of the hollow pressed at her thoughts. Avaron's gaze, the void beneath, the creatures born of light and shadow. She wondered if the trial was meant to prepare her for the rift, or simply break her before she could reach it. The heart of ruin pulsed, and she swore she heard it whisper, "Prove yourself." Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, she dreamed of standing in an arena carved from obsidian, her wings bound, her blade gone. Across from her, Kael stood with his sword drawn, his expression unreadable. She woke with her heart pounding, the phantom taste of ash in her mouth. Dawn was still hours away, but the trial waited for no one. She rose, strapping on her weapons, and walked into the shadows of the palace. The arena was vast, its floor a mosaic of black and white stone that shimmered faintly under the sun. Spectators filled the high tiers, their voices a low murmur that rose and fell like distant waves. Lysara stood at the center, her armor light enough for flight, her blade warm in her palm. Across from her, the gates opened to reveal her opponent. Cloaked in gray, wings the color of smoke, the figure moved with fluid precision, each step deliberate. When the hood fell back, her breath caught. It was her mother's face. She knew it couldn't be real. Her mother had been gone since Lysara was a child, taken by war and silence. Yet the woman before her smiled with the same softness she remembered. "You've grown," the apparition said, her voice carrying over the still air. "And you've strayed." The words struck deeper than any blade could. Lysara tightened her grip. "You're not her." The figure tilted her head. "I'm what you've made of her." The trial began with no signal. The apparition moved like water, her strikes impossible to predict. Lysara fought defensively, her mind a storm of disbelief and rage. Each clash of steel sent shocks up her arms. Each dodge cost her breath. The heart of ruin flared within her, urging her to end it quickly. But something in her resisted. To strike down this phantom felt like betraying something sacred. The apparition's voice wove through the fight, slipping into the cracks of her resolve. "You carry the heart, but it carries you more. It will hollow you until nothing remains but the weapon it desires." Lysara's strikes grew sharper, angrier. "Then I'll carve my own shape into it," she snarled, driving her blade forward. The phantom blocked, but the force sent her skidding back across the stones. For a moment, the arena faded. She stood instead in a burning city, the same one from her visions, her mother's hand gripping hers. "Run, and don't look back," the woman said again. Only this time, Lysara pulled free. "No," she whispered. "Not this time." She drove her blade into the apparition's chest, and the figure dissolved into ash that scattered on the wind. When the vision cleared, the crowd was silent. Varen's expression was unreadable, but her eyes gleamed with something close to satisfaction. Kael stood at the edge of the arena, his gaze fierce, his hands clenched. The trial was over, but the real test had only just begun. The crack in the sky was no longer a hairline fracture. It was a wound, spilling light and shadow in equal measure. The city's walls groaned as if in pain, their living vines curling away from the breach. Lysara stood on the highest terrace, the heart of ruin burning so brightly against her skin that it left a faint glow. Kael joined her, his wings tight against his back. "It's time," he said. "If we wait any longer, there won't be a city left to save." They flew together toward the rift, the wind howling with unnatural voices. As they neared, the air grew heavier, charged with power that clung to their feathers. The light from the breach was blinding, and through it, Lysara thought she saw entire landscapes shifting. mountains turning to oceans, forests to fields of ash. The closer they came, the more the heart's pulse synced with her own heartbeat, until she couldn't tell which was which. A shape emerged from the rift, wings vast enough to eclipse the sun. It was Avaron, but changed, his body threaded with veins of molten light, his eyes no longer silver, but the gold of a dying star. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice layered, echoing with something older than either of them. "You'll never leave." Kael stepped in front of her. "Then we end it here." Avaron smiled, and the rift widened. Creatures poured out, more solid than the echoes they had fought before. Their bodies shimmered with shifting patterns, each movement wrong in ways the eye struggled to follow. Lysara fought alongside Kael, their blades cutting arcs of light through the swarm. But the breach only spilled more. The heart throbbed harder, almost frantic now, and a single thought formed in her mind. One must fall for the other to rise. Avaron cut a path toward her, his strikes heavy but precise, designed to drive her back toward the rift. She parried, the heat of his blade searing even through steel. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. His answer was quiet, almost sorrowful. "Because it's the only way to save what matters." And then he struck, sending her skidding to the very edge of the breach. Kael's shout reached her through the chaos, but the light from the rift was pulling her in, every part of her screaming that this was the moment. She had to choose, to fall, or to make someone else fall in her place. The battle blurred into flashes of light and shadow, each moment a heartbeat away from ending. Kael reached her side, blocking a strike from Avaron that would have sent her into the rift. "Stay with me," he growled, his blade locking with Avaron's in a clash that sent sparks flying. But Avaron's strength was beyond mortal now, and with a twist, he broke Kael's defense, sending him to his knees. The rift's pull grew stronger, dragging at Lysara's wings, her bones, her very thoughts. She felt the heart's will pouring into her, not as a voice now, but as pure, undeniable instinct. "Jump." She looked at Kael, at the defiance in his eyes even as he struggled to stand. She looked at Avaron, whose face was twisted with something like grief, and she understood. This had always been the end. She stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. Enough, her voice carried, not because she shouted, but because the power of the heart rode on every syllable. Both of them froze. "If someone has to fall," she said, "it will be me." Kael's eyes widened. "No." Avaron's grip tightened on his blade, but he didn't move. "You don't understand what it will take," he warned. "I understand enough," she replied. She turned toward the rift, its light bathing her in gold and shadow. Every instinct screamed against it, but beneath the fear, there was a strange calm, the kind that came when every choice had been stripped away. Kael's hand caught her wrist. "I can't lose you." She met his gaze, her heart breaking in ways no blade could mend. "You won't." "Not really." Then she stepped backward into the light. The world exploded into silence. The rift swallowed her whole, its light folding around her like wings of fire. For a heartbeat, she felt herself dissolve, into wind, into stone, into the very pulse of the city. She saw every court, every soul, every choice that had led here. And in that vastness, she understood the truth. The heart of ruin had never been a weapon. It was a bridge. When Lysara opened her eyes, she stood on the edge of a city both familiar and new. The walls still lived, but their vines were laced with gold, their stones singing with quiet energy. The rift was gone, sealed not with force, but with balance, light and shadow braided together. She felt the heart's presence still, but it no longer burned. It rested, as though it had finally found its place. Kael was there, his wings folded tightly, his expression unreadable until he saw her. Then he was moving, crossing the distance in a breath, his hands gripping her shoulders as if to make sure she was real. "You came back," he said, and the break in his voice undid her. She smiled faintly. "I told you. You wouldn't lose me." Avaron stood a few steps away, his form still marked by the rift's light. He met her gaze, and for once, there was no battle in his eyes. "The Court of Ashes will rise again," he said, "but not in war." She nodded. "Not in war." He bowed his head slightly, then turned, vanishing into the golden mist that curled at the city's edge. The people of Aereth gathered below, their voices rising in cautious wonder. The breach was gone. The skies were whole. And though the memory of the rift would linger, so too would the proof that it could be closed. Lysara felt the weight of every gaze, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a promise. Kael's wing brushed hers, a silent tether between them. "So," he said, his voice low, "what now?" She looked toward the horizon, where the dawn painted the clouds in colors the sky had never held before. "Now," she said, "we make sure it never opens again. And maybe, though she didn't say it, they'd finally have the time to find out what else they could be." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and distant flowers. The city's song swelled, and above them, the new sky stretched wide and unbroken. For the first time in years, it felt like home.